Hey everybody, it's Miss Peachy from WCA Biology again. Different day, different outfit. So now here we are on Unit 2, Lesson 7, Chemical Reactions. So what's interesting about this unit is I feel like this unit or this lesson should have come kind of at the beginning of this unit because we've already been talking a lot about chemical reactions. So my opinion, but here we are going to talk a little bit more about what a chemical reaction is and some of the terminology that goes with them. So we have our keywords: activation energy, chemical equation, chemical reaction, endothermic, enzyme, exothermic, reactant, and product. And almost all of these terms should be familiar to you, or you should be familiar with them because we have kind of used them and we have kind of talked about these types of reactions in photosynthesis and in cellular respiration, which are both chemical reactions in the previous lessons. So again, as a reminder, I do have a notes guide that goes with this one. Just some key terms on here and some key concepts, and you would be able to type into this and make your notes from it. And don't forget that, did it again. Don't forget that it is there it is. I'm sorry about that. It always takes both of them for some reason. It is a Google Doc, which means that you can't type in the master copy. You're going to have to make a copy of it first. So, if you didn't realize that before in lessons 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, hopefully you know that now. So you have to go and make a copy. You go to File, make a copy, and then you can type into the copy. Or you can download that to Word. So let's look at some of the terminology here. So we have chemical reactions, and it's a reaction that changes something, changes the chemical formula of something actually. Conservation of matter, so matter is conserved, but the arrangements between atoms are changed. So bonds are broken and new bonds are formed to form a new substance. And that's what chemical reactions actually are. And they're giving you an example here of rusting, that iron can actually react with the oxygen in the atmosphere to form something called iron oxide. So you have iron, which is bonding to oxygen, forming a new substance in this reaction. Iron oxide, it's a synthesis reaction, and it forms a substance called rust. So that's one example of a chemical reaction you might be familiar with. So we model chemical reactions by something called a chemical equation. And in a chemical equation, we have two sides. We have our reactants side, which is on the left, and we have our products side, which is on the right. And then what joins the reactants to the products is a little arrow, and that arrow means yields. So it's giving us something, it's producing something, it is yielding something. And that is what that arrow represents. Whenever there are two substances, we put a plus size sign between them to indicate that this substance has to be combined with this substance to then yield or make this substance. And again, this is a synthesis reaction. You had me for physical science, you remember what a synthesis reaction is. So in this equation, we have sulfur, and it is being combined with oxygen, which is a diatomic molecule, O2, to create a substance called sulfur dioxide. So I remember it. I sometimes have a hard time remembering the difference, or which ones are reactants and which ones are products, unless I say products first, because it makes sense to me to think that I'm producing something, and the thing that I'm producing is on the right. So if I can remember that that one's the product, then I automatically know the other one is the reactants. So again, we have our formula for photosynthesis, which we've looked at before. And in photosynthesis, we have our reactants and our products. And in our photosynthesis reaction, the reactants are water and carbon dioxide, and the products are oxygen and glucose. Light energy is not part of the chemical reaction in that it isn't a reactant. See, I did it again. I almost mixed them up. But it makes the reaction happen. So it provides the energy to start the reaction. So the type of energy, and I'm kind of going down there a little bit here, a little quicker, but that energy, we call that the activation energy. So there's a minimum amount of energy in order for the reactants to actually start reacting. So that's the activation energy, and sunlight provides the reactivation energy for photosynthesis to start. There are two main kinds of reactions. We have what are known as exothermic and endothermic reactions. Exothermic reactions produce more energy than they require. So they give off excess energy, and we typically feel that in the form of heat, but it can be light or something like that too. So exo, meaning it's giving off or it's exiting the reaction. So it gives off more energy than it requires. Okay. An endothermic reaction means it requires more energy than it gives off. Oftentimes, these will feel cold to you because they're taking the heat from your hand to fuel the reaction. So they're stealing your energy and they're using that energy to make the reaction go. And that means that your hand feels cold or the substance feels cold to the touch. In reality, it's actually taking your energy to make the reaction go. It is endothermic. So it feels cold, but it's actually stealing heat from you. So it's requiring energy. Endothermic reactions require more energy than they give off. Okay. So when we look at like some of these substances here, for example, I'm going to go back. I kind of skipped around here. Photosynthesis, carbon dioxide and water are the reactants, while glucose and oxygen are the products. The bonds between water and carbon dioxide molecules break and new bonds form. So that's our chemical reaction. So breaking bonds and forming new bonds requires a change in energy. Energy is needed to break the bonds. Energy is stored when the new bonds are formed. During an exothermic reaction, more energy is released to the environment than is absorbed. We already talked about that as well. So cellular respiration is an exothermic reaction. The body uses some energy during cellular respiration, but a lot more energy is stored in the bonds of ATP. So it requires energy to do cellular respiration, but what's produced, ATP, is higher in energy than what was originally kind of required to start that reaction. Endothermic reactions, again, feel cold, so they take energy from the environment to get them to go. Photosynthesis is an endothermic reaction. It's absorbing the energy from the sun to get the reaction to go, and it stores that energy in the molecule of glucose, okay, for to be used later. And that pretty much goes through the terms on that page. And then if we go ahead to this slide, which is, I don't know, page 8 of 10 here, we talk about chemical reactions in the human body continued, and we remember that enzymes are special kinds of proteins that act as things called catalysts. And again, if you had physical science with me or with somebody else, hopefully you remember what a catalyst is. A catalyst is something that speeds up the chemical reaction, but it doesn't actually take part in that reaction at all. It just makes the reaction happen faster. So it isn't part of the chemical equation because it's not part of the chemical reaction. We use the lock and key model to understand enzymes. So they can either join things together or split things apart depending on the type of reaction that we want to have happen. So in this first model, we see an enzyme here that is, this is our enzyme, this is the protein, and this is the target molecule in pink. They are specially designed to fit together like a lock and a key. So in this example, enzyme's kind of acting like the lock and the target molecule is kind of acting like the key. When they bond together, the enzyme then weakens the bonds there and causes them to split apart and be released, forming two new molecules, right? So in this job, enzyme's job is to split that molecule apart. In this second example, this enzyme is designed to fit these two molecules into it and cause them to join together. So it's actually causing a new substance to form in that it is joining them together. So it's doing exactly the opposite. So like catalysts, enzymes weaken the bonds between the reactants, which lowers the activation energy and lets that reaction go. Remember, you need to meet that activation energy for the reaction to even start. And so sometimes that reaction or that activation energy requirement is way too high for your body to be able to get the reaction to go. So an enzyme is required to bring that activation energy down a little bit in order to get that chemical reaction to actually take place. Okay. So, further on, we talk a little bit about a word, denatures. So, what happens sometimes is environmental changes can cause an enzyme to pretty much change shape and break apart, which causes it not to be able to do its function, right? So, if we see that lock and key model, if the enzyme wasn't the right shape, it could not bond with the target molecules, and therefore it couldn't do its job. If you heat an enzyme up, that can cause it to change its shape and it can cause it to not be able to do its job. And we call that denaturing. So there's certain things that can denature enzymes, causing them to change shape. For example, changes in temperature, changes in pH can cause an enzyme to change shape. So there's a lot of different things. Sometimes a chemical substance can also denature enzymes, like alcohol or something, if it's very harsh, can cause an enzyme to become denatured. But denaturing is just destroying that enzyme, causing that enzyme, which is a protein, to change its shape so it no longer can function as a lock or a key to be able to perform the function that it does. And then the chemical reaction can't take place. So that is this lesson in a nutshell. Hopefully that helped you guys out. And if you have questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next one.